the Symfony2 content management framework. It's going to be like a few slides with an introduction, and then I want to show you some code, because code is just going to tell better what you can do and how things are supposed to be done than with lots of slides and pictures and blah blah. A few words about me. I'm David Buchmann, and I come from Switzerland. I work there for a company called Leap. We do web development mainly with PHP, and I'm specializing in Symfony2, as you could have guessed. And I'm one of the maintainers of the content management framework. So, like on a very high level, the content management framework, the goal of it is to provide you with CMS functionality for use in your applications. So we want to offer an alternative to this dilemma of, should I develop custom with Symfony and then like the content management functionality is a pain, or should I take something like Drupal, which is great for the content management, but doing a custom application with like a lot of business logic with Drupal, you kind of miss a sound foundation like Symfony would provide. And one other fundamental idea or goal was that we said we want to build everything very modular. So we have separate bundles that do one aspect of content management. And if you just need one aspect because the rest you do yourself or it doesn't really apply to your use case, then you just use that one piece of it and not, you don't get like, it's not an all or nothing thing. To set my timer, otherwise I'm going to talk too long. Right. So we have really separate pieces that just do one job. But of course, they integrate with each other, and a lot of the dependencies are actually optional. So it checks like, do I have this feature? And if yes, it starts to use it. And if it's not there, then it doesn't break. Now, what does content management mean in this sense? So we are not trying to build some sort of product information system or something, but really like thinking about web content management websites, which means the user can control the content of pages. There is pages with content in it. You need some editing for that. Then you probably have some sort of navigation structure, like a menu system, breadcrumbs, and the user wants to control that. He doesn't want a new deployment to get a new main navigation point. And the same goes for the routing, so for the URLs. If you have a CEO guy improving your Google ranking, he's going to tell you if your URLs look like node/42, that's not good for Google. I want the name of the thing the page talks about even in the URL. And then finally, sometimes you also want a more fine-grained control on what is shown on a page, on having like pieces of information, which is something that we solve with a thing called block bundle, where you can manage little pieces of information. All right, and that's it for the introduction. So to make this like touchable and visible, I want to build with you a conference website that's gonna handle and present presentations that take place in rooms. The presentations are held by speakers, and of course we also need a schedule and somewhere where we see information about all the speakers. And because we want to be modern and want to have a very easy way to edit small mistakes in the content, we want front-end editing. And then we also do some back-end, administration back-end, where we can create new presentations, manage the data. But I'm going to start with building the application without the editing. And we're going to load fixtures, like dummy data, to show all the functionality, and then we add the editing in the end. Because that's just way faster to show you than if I would have to create all the content in the admin interface manually. Right, so actually this tutorial is also available on GitHub with pull requests for each step. So it's going to be 10 steps to add pieces of information. So you can later follow that or read it in more details. And for each step, I'm just going to highlight the most important things. So after the first step, After the first step, we don't have anything at all yet. We just have a Symfony CMF ready to do something. And here, what I want to show you is the composer file, where basically we just add dependencies for Symfony CMF and for a specific bundle that can help you to get started really quick. And then in the app kernel, we will instantiate a couple of bundles. So actually there is a bundle for the database. We will use the PHP content repository for that. We have a dependency on the KNP menu bundle, and then these are the CMF bundles. Is it okay to read? You can see it? Right. And then finally, we have a little bit of configuration, but really not too much. We configure doctrine deball like normal. In the demo, I use SQLite because that's like really the easiest to set up. And then we configure doctrine the content repository bindings. And here we actually give it like this deball so that it can store data through doctrine deball. And then we have a very few configurations to do for the CMF itself. And basically we have to tell the core bundle what persistence layer we want to use. And PHPCR is at the moment is the only one that's supported by every bundle. And if you would want to use Doctrine ORM, you would have to do more steps yourself. It's totally not impossible, but it would be some more work, so I choose the easiest to show you. Okay, then let's switch to the second step, where I use the normal Symfony command to create a bundle, which is living here. It's called a conference bundle. And for now, it's pretty small. The important or interesting thing is we have a data fixture. This is let's make this bigger. So that's a mechanism you might know from Doctrine ORM. It's exactly the same with the content repository, where you have a command to load data into your database. And what we do here is first some bootstrapping so that we have the place where we can add the content into the repository. And then we create some page objects. And we create a page, this path that's like the root path of the system. Give it a title, a body. Then we create another page that we call schedule, give it a title, a label, which will be used for the menu actually, the title, which is the content title, and we do another one for the speakers. So all of those are just pages. Now let's follow the page. That's something provided by the simple CMS bundle. And a page actually represents the thing the CMF needs to have a URL for you. And at the same time, it represents the content and also the menu entry. And actually, the CMF would allow you to split all that apart. So, for example, if you have a multi-language site and your URLs have to be different for each language, then you probably wouldn't want to use the simple CMS bundle, but use separate, like content that's separated from the URLs. But to make it as easy as possible, I chose to do it like this. And that will make that actually this schedule, that's part of the URL. So this is defining what the URL is going to look like. And now after running that, we get, let's make this full screen. We get a very simple website. So, for example, I can go now to the schedule page, and it's just showing the content that we put into this page. So where was the schedule? So it says schedule, conference schedule, and because it says conference schedule, that's what comes out here. Now, there is one more step between the repository and what you see, and that's the template. So we need some template. Wait. Right. We need a template which basically it gets passed in a variable called CMF main content, which is whatever the route set is the content of this page. And then we use just plain normal twig to access things on it. So it has a title, we can output the title. It has a body, which we can output. We output it raw because it's supposed to contain HTML, so that you could have a WYSIWYG editor to define that content. Now, how do we know, or how does Symfony know why does it use this template? That piece comes from here. We have this configuration for the routing saying, actually there is several ways to define it, and we will see others. But here we just say, if you encounter a page document of the simple CMS document, simple CMS bundle, then take this template. And so that's why we are using this template. By the way, if you get lost at some point, then please shout if I'm going too fast, or if you think I'm going too slow and you want me to move faster. So far, everything is okay? Great. Okay, so now we have a couple of pages. You notice that it says to do, make the real menu. We do that later. First, we want to have some specific content. So let's start with the rooms and the presentations. I'm just switching branches to get to the next step. And let's close this stuff. And now we have a room document, which actually extends page. So it's very small, this document. It's just adding a description. And as with the doctrine ORM, we have the mapping information. We say like, oh, that's a document, and let's have this field description so that we can store additional information about a room. And we have fixtures for that. And so basically we create some rooms with a description. So here we have I separated that in a method to not copy-paste this new room, set position, set description, everything. And so the parent for the rooms is just the home place, like the home page. Under the home page, we want to have a rooms page. And no, sorry, we do have the rooms page under the parent, under the root, because we created that as a static page. And inside that rooms page, we want to add the rooms. And then each room is a document of its own with a specific type, which will allow us to do cool stuff later on. The other thing we add at this point is the presentation. Again, it's a page with a speciality that it has a start time so that we know when the presentation will start, because a normal page doesn't have such an information. So let's have it in a semantical way so that we can use it later in the application logic. And we load the presentations as well, and we attach them to the rooms. So it's just loading code. I get the rooms thing, and I get the first room out of the rooms and the last room, because I know there is only two. It's cheating a bit. And then I create presentations with the data for the first and the second room, and this looks just like this. So I have the URL segment that I want. I have a title, a body, and a time, and create presentations with that. So when we look at that, it's going to look like this. So we see that presentation. It has a nice URL saying it's in the room, Copernicus, and it's diving deep into Twig. So Google is going to be happy with that. But we miss the date here. We don't see it. And well, obviously, because we didn't tell the CMF to use any specific template that would care about the date. So if you remember the index template, which we had here, it doesn't say anything about date. So obviously, nothing is going to happen with the date. So the next step is we're going to specify a template for that. And so we add another line saying, for the presentation type, please use this, oops, that's not good. Use the special template for presentations. It's important that this comes before the page template, because presentation extends the page, and whenever something matches in this list, it's taken. So you have to do the specific things first and then the general things later. And the template is not very surprising, I hope. So it's also extending this base template to get the page structure, outputting the title, and then it adds some information about the conference, outputs the start date, and it also outputs like you remember, the presentations are children of the room. They're attached to a room. So we can go to the parent of the presentation and output its title to see what room the presentation takes place in. And then it looks like this. So we have the date and we have the information what room it's taking place. Right. Then next step would be the schedule. Still not really helpful because that's just a page. And for this, it's a little bit more complicated to provide the information because we need all the rooms with all the presentations in it. So what we will do is define a controller for that gathers the information and then renders a specific template. So I call this schedule controller. Whenever you want to do a specific controller for the CMF, you can expect this content document parameter, which is the content of this route, of this URL. And what we do is, this is to get the date in the right formatting, to make the content repository happy with it. And then we select all rooms and execute that query and render our specific template and pass in, define the main content is this content document. So that would be the schedule for the title and all that. And then we have a field rooms, which has the result of this search. So it should have all the room documents found in the content repository. And then next step, we have to make sure that this controller is actually used. And that happens because we define here to use a controller for a specific type. The type we're going to call schedule. And the thing is, the schedule is just a page. So if we would say every page has to be handled by the schedule controller, we would have a problem. Or we would have in the controller have to figure out, is it really a schedule or not? And then as soon as you have two such pages which need a specific controller, you have lost. So what we do is we use this type concept, and when we look at overview data, right, here we add to the schedule document, we add this default, so that's a route default called type, and we give the value schedule so that the routing will see, okay, this route was actually of type schedule, so I have to take this special controller. And then now we will get this special template used, which has the rooms. So we output first just the schedule document for the title, and maybe there is a body with some lead. And then we loop over the rooms and output the rooms. And then I like to render the actual information about the presentation. I made a new template rather than having a deep nested loop, but it's just for readability. And presentations, we just output the start time because the date should be, it's the same all the time. And that's going to look like this. So now we have the time and we have the titles, and they're actually linked. So I can go and see the details. Why are they linked? Because here we set to make it a link and to have the URL of a document that's in the CMF that's routable. You can just use the path function as you would with a Symfony route name. Works exactly the same, gives you a URL to that document. even though, of course, presentation represents an object. It's not a route name or anything. But that's because we built an extension to the router to handle these documents, which makes it very expressive, in my opinion. Now, what's kind of missing here still is the speakers. So let's add speakers. And have a look at the speaker document, which is now new. Again, we extend page, always the same. And we link it with the presentations by using a content repository concept. So in the content repository, you can have any content having a reference on anything else, and you can get the backlink, so you can ask what is referring me. And so here we define the speaker wants to see what conferences are referencing him. So we say must be coming from this presentation document on the speakers property. So that's quite similar to the many-to-many relations in the ORM in the end. And on the presentation, it's the same the other way around. So here we say we reference many on this speakers field. And when we load the speakers, we not only, like it's similar again how we do it, but then once we created the speaker, we also retrieve the presentation. That's just because I put that into the fixture data, what presentation, who is giving what presentation. But then on the presentation, we add the speaker in the model and persist the speaker and flush like the whole doctrine document manager. And then we have this linking between speakers and presentations. And now, maybe let's start here. Now we can output who the speakers are on any conference. And for the so for the schedule, it's the same. We show them. For the so we also want to build this speakers page, which lists all speakers. And this again, the speakers is just a normal page. So we need a specific template to be used. We could again go and say like, that's a type speakers page or speakers, and use a specific controller for that. But that's not really justified because we don't need any specific controller. We know exactly that all the speakers are just child of the speakers page. So what we can do is here, sorry, not here. That would be in the data. So here to the speaker, we add this new information that we add a default for the template saying to use this special template to render this page. And that's like yet another way to configure how your data has to be displayed. And so finally, we get this nice listening. We use again the path thing to link to the content. So those templates you can give to anybody. He will totally get what he's doing. It's not complicated. It's just like Twig usually is. Now, I didn't link the speakers, and the reason for that is we have this speakers page, which is just one long page of all the speakers. I create anchors in there, but if I would just use the path function, I would get something else. I would get the URL of that single document that represents one speaker, and I don't want to have that. I don't want to have one page per speaker. So what we will do here is a custom way of linking those speakers. And that's pretty simple, actually. We just take this, we build a twig extension, define a function that we call speaker path. And you have to pass in a speaker, of course. And then we generate the URL. So this speaker's path is actually configured globally. What is the URL of the speaker's page? So like the URL of this, of the other one, of course, of speakers. And then we append the name of the speaker document. So the name, that's not the display name, that's the system name of this document. And we use exactly the same to build the anchor. And then we can use that in the speakers list to create our speakers path. And it's going to look like this. So now we have links, and if I click that, I have the anchor in the URL, so I jump to the right place. Now, next thing to change is we still don't have this menu. Would be really nice to have a menu. So let's do that. And because we were using these simple page documents, it's going to be really, really easy. They already build or represent the menu structure. So the only thing we have to do is render that menu. And that's somewhere in this base template that I hid from you so far. And it's actually here. So we just use the KNP menu render function. And the CMF provides something to find menus. So it's configured where in the content tree of the content repository the menus, the menu roots are. And you specify the name you want to load. So here we say we want to load this, it's called simple because the simple CMS bundle, unless you configure it differently, it's living under the name simple. So that's how we render that. And then we get those menu points for the things that are in the menu. And if a page is actually in the menu or not depends on if we set the label or not. So when you remember the fixtures, here we sometimes set labels. Like here we set schedule, we set the label speakers. That's why they appear in the menu. All right, so now let's get to editing. What? Didn't want to change that file, right? For the editing, the first thing I did, and you can see that in the pull request, it's not specific to the CMF, it's just having a login. So I configured security according to the book of Symfony and just did like the default template, the default controller for in-memory usernames. But the thing was I don't want everybody to edit, so I need some sort of login functionality. And Then, if we have a look at the composal.json, we'll see that something new appeared here. So we use this create bundle. Create bundle is the CMF facility to leverage a JavaScript library called create.js, which in turn is really cool because you can just throw it on your site, launch it, and it's going to inspect your content. And the only thing you have to do to help it is you need to identify on your content what is what, and that's done using RDF. So it's just adding some attributes in the HTML to tell, okay, this content is the content with the ID speakers, and that's the title of this content, and that whole thing in this div is the WYSIWYG content for the speakers page. And once you have that and load create.js, it's making everything editable, and the bundle is handling the save requests to the backend. To define those attributes, there is a library that can help you. I mean, you could just hard code that in your templates, but it's rather easy to do mistakes. It's not very readable. So in a folder, in the resources, you can define RDF mappings. And if we look at one of these, let's take the speaker. Then you can, if you want to expose semantic content, then you should take some care to decide what your schema should be and what your type of should be, so that machines reading your website actually can make semantical sense of your content. But just for the editing, you don't have to care. So here I said, well, okay, whatever, I don't mind. So I just use some custom namespace with no meaning. The important piece is that I say the field full name is of type schema headline, and the body is of type schema text. And that's what's going to be used by create.js. And we can also define on these property types what kind of editing you want. So if it's a WYSIWYG thing or plain text, or you could define your own editing things that create.js is going to call if you click on that area and want to edit it. And then to output that thing. Oh no, my screen is too small to really see it. Maybe that's the right one, speaker. That sounds right. So what changes is that instead of just outputting CMF main content.title, we wrap that in this create PHP tag, and then we need to, in something that encloses all the properties, we need to output the attributes, the RDF attributes, so that there is this twig function provided. And then for each thing, we need to output the attributes of that property. So that's what we do on this line. And that's basically it. We have to bootstrap the whole thing, which again is mainly handled by the create bundle. So at the top, we include a CSS, a twig template that loads all the CSS that's needed. And at the bottom, we call this controller to render create.js, like the embedding of create.js and the bootstrap. And this one actually looks at the permissions, so you can configure what role has the right to edit. And you can just put that into your template. And if the user doesn't have the role, it will just do nothing. And if he has the role, it will include create.js and bootstrap it. Because otherwise, you would just see the editing, and when you click on save, it tells you, like, you're not allowed to save that, which would be stupid. now when we reload, I'm not logged in anymore. So first thing I have to log in, otherwise I don't see anything. Now that I'm logged in, I get this gray toolbar. I can also minimize it. And when I click on edit, I get this visual highlighting what I can actually edit. And I can click save. Saved. If I reload the page, it's still here. And the same also works, for example, on the speakers page. So if we go into edit, we see that we can also edit like many things on the same page. Sorry. So I can go and edit in various places and then save, and CreateJS is handling that for me. It's also doing other cool stuff, like imagine I accidentally got away from the page after typing. It's going to tell me like, you have local modifications, do you want to restore them? And it's going to put it back, and then I can click save. And that's actually not anything of this we had to implement in the CMF or anything. That's just CreateJS doing it for you. Okay, do we still have time? A little bit, little bit. Backend editing with Sonata admin. So here, I need to clear the cache because I'm adding translation files. So there is a Sonata admin for the content repository, and the first thing to look at is the configuration part. So I just separated that into a file and included from the main config, but I could also just copy that into the main config. So that's just the standard Sonata boilerplate configuration. I didn't do anything on this. And actually in a real project, you would want to care about this dashboard thing and make it more useful for your users and customize it, because right now it's going to be very simplistic, very basic. What's interesting here is we have this document tree definition, which defines what type of content can be underneath what type of content. And that's going to be used in the interface, this information. Yeah, I guess I'm just going to show you that first, and then we continue something else. Yeah, cache clear locked me out because I didn't do anything about that. Now let's get to the admin side. And so on the right side, we have these look like the normal Sonata admins. If you know Sonata ORM, you can go to the list of all content, add new content. And on the left side, you see this content tree. So for the first time, we really see what the internal logic of our content is. We have this CMS node, which is the root for everything. And that's the home page, the schedule page, the speakers page, and this container that holds the rooms, and in the rooms there is the presentations. And if, for example, I click here on the rooms with the right button, can you see anything? If that's okay. I can only add a presentation to the room, and that's because the room said I can only have a presentation as a child. And if I go onto a speaker, I can only delete it. I cannot add anything because speakers are not supposed to contain any other content inside. Right, so next little bit is on the security config, right? So well, actually, this stuff, that's all just the boilerplate security thing of Symfony. What we added is an access control to the admin, because otherwise anybody could go in there and edit your content. That's not what you want. And the other thing we did is to the role admin, we added this role Sonata admin, which makes Sonata know that you should see the menus of my screen would be bigger. This would be navigation at the top. Oops, wait. Right. It's better. And then I get these quick access. So when I'm on a list of rooms and I realize I want to edit speakers, I can just switch somewhere else. And these are the lists. So we configure a little bit to say, on the speaker, I want to see in the list also what presentations he's giving. And if we click on one, then we get to some editing form. Maybe have a particularly interesting case. Let's see the presentations. Look at the presentation, because those, so actually we had a mistake. Lucas Smith wasn't talking about Twig this morning, so I can remove him, save that, and it's gone. And just for the example, let's assume Piotr actually did, so we can add him and save that. The only thing I had to do was creating these admin classes, and there I define what's on the list. So I said, okay, I want to see the title. So that's the presentation list. Let's have a look at that. We see the speakers, we see the room it's taking place in. So that's because we said we want the title. If we say add identifier, it's going to be linked, and otherwise it's just text. We show the speakers, we show the parent, and we show those dates. And for the form, we actually extend the page admin again, because it's saving us a lot of configuration. We define that for the parent, we want to select any of the rooms. So that's why when we go in here, we can just select rooms. I cannot put a presentation anywhere in this tree, only as a child of the room. And for the speakers, we define that you can select any speaker, and it's multiple, because you should be able to have many speakers for the same presentation. All right, and that's about it. So I hope you got something out of this, and if you have any questions, now would be the time.
What's the performance of this?
Wait. Just have a switch.
Yeah. There. Can you hear me? Great.
Right.
What's the performance of the CMF? I saw in the debug toolbar there's quite a lot of queries being run, for example, for the schedule page.
Yes, I didn't go into optimizing here. What you can do, like, basically if you do nothing, then indeed it can be slow, because if you have this aggregation page, because each time you get something, it does a new request. But what we could have done here is tell the repository to prefetch like all direct children, and then at the point where we loaded the schedule page, maybe do a request to get like the rooms with all its children in one go. It's basically the same problem as with Doctrine ORM. If you do stupidly like I did here for simplicity, then you're going to run into problems. In general, we have like one issue, which is about the menu. If you have a bigger menu and a multi-language site. Like here with the simple CMS, it would be less of a problem, but with a multi-language site and specific URLs, it can get quite slow because right now it's acting quite stupidly. And we're looking into that, and we're always open for contributions to improve things.
Is Symfony2 compatible with Propel or only Doctrine?
So we gave our best to stay independent of the actual storage layer. So there is some bundles that work with the Doctrine content repository and with Doctrine ORM. I never tried out if it really would work with Propel. And like the drawback right now would be that you would have to define all your model classes yourself. But in theory, it should be totally compatible. So like all the services, all the logic we build, we try to really decouple it from Doctrine as much as we can. And so there would be some things where you would have to write or have your own implementation of an interface, and you would need your own models. But it should definitely be doable.
Would it be easy to integrate some backend parts into the Create.js frontend, like the adding of a room or the connection between a room and a speaker? Or would that be quite hard? Because I think the front-end interface is great, but the back-end interface is, and it would be really nice to put them together.
Mm-hmm. So I think like the options to use Sonata admin like this in the front-end, I'm not so sure if that would be the way to go. But actually Create.js can do more than we currently use. So for example, if you define the right semantics for it in the RDF, you can say this thing here, for example, that's the collection of speakers, and you can add speaker types of content here, and then Create.js would make you an add button. You could even have mixed collections where you say here you can add speakers or whatever other thing, and when you click add, it would ask you which one do you want to create. So creating content would actually be possible without too much pain. Yep, and then like having, as I mentioned, for the properties, you can have specific editors. So it would be probably just some JavaScript effort to write an editor for selecting a target. And then you need something to call back to the backend and get a list of options. And you select one and put that value into the field, and then store it back through the normal Create.js storage process. So I think there definitely is options there, and the reason we didn't push that further was mainly the lack of people being into JavaScript who would do that. So would be really happy to have people help out on that. Thanks.
What about internationalization? Is the content translatable at any point by the CMF itself? Like, is it supported by CMF?
So the CMF itself is pretty much separated from the storage logic. So like the front-end parts of the CMF don't really need to know about translations. But for example, the content repository, it can do translations, or with the ORM you can use the get mode translatable, or you could do some other scheme. And for example, with the content repository, you just get the content in the right language. So each content exists in translations, but when you find something, it looks what's the request language, and you just get that. So the menu doesn't need to know about it. It just asks for a menu node, and it gets it in the right language. And for example, in Crate.js, so in the front-end editing, when you store something back, it's also going to be in the same language as it was originally like displayed. So it also doesn't really need to know about translations. Now for Crate.js, for example, it would be nice to have some plugin that would show you maybe this page is actually not yet translated to French or to Polish, and allow you to do that. But right now for like creating a new translation, we rely on the admin backend where you can just create a new translation of your content.
I would like to know about the state of the CMF actually. I remember Lucas Smith saying at the Symfony Live in Berlin 2012 actually, like over 1 year ago, there is supposed to be some beta release. Well, it didn't come for a while, but that doesn't matter now, I guess. When I look at the sandbox project, which is there is a lot of work still to do for me before I can give it to my marketing department, for example. Like and the roadmap doesn't seem to be like maintained in real time, or maybe it changed in the meantime. I don't know. But what's the state? Is there some milestones, something like? Will it ever actually be like a done product, or will it stay in a framework mode kinda, and we always have to adapt it?
So the idea of the CMF really is to provide you with framework. We released the stable version in October, I think, so this autumn, which really works pretty well. Is stable. And now we also really take care about backwards compatibility to not break anything anymore. But the goal is really to provide you with tools to build something. And in my opinion, you cannot do both really like at the same time, because to have something that's usable for an end user, you have to take away like a lot of options. You have to limit the options so that there is only one way to do something and that it's really easy. And if you want to give options to a developer, you shouldn't take away all the options or all the possibilities to where he could hook his special requirements. So the goal of the framework is really to stay open. The sandbox, we actually discussed about dropping it because it's giving this kind of wrong perception that it could be an end-user CMS, which it's not, and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be something to play around, to explore the CMF. But then either you have a project that has really specific content management requirements, and you say, I'm going to take Create Bundle and have front-end editing. I don't care about the rest. Or I want routing, or I want the publish workflows of the core bundle, or something like that. Or I need to build my huge specific CMS, and I start with the whole bunch of things, but then do my own. Or the other option, which recently finally started, is that people picked up the CMF and build a CMS around it. So right now there is a project called Presta CMS by the guys doing the Presta shop in France. So they started building a really end-user friendly CMS application on top of the CMF. And there's another one which I just can't. Zulu, right, thanks.
Maybe you can put that on the website with your talk together. The last point was very interesting for me. I didn't know about that.
Mm-hmm. So right now, those two, they're like again at the not yet stable point. But I think that's really how I see the future, that there is specific CMSs on top of the CMF that allow you to do something specific, or maybe one that's really good for doing tons of microsites, or one that's really good for a big website with complex content, and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you will get the microphone.
What about handling of other types of media, such as images? How much support do you see there, and in what layer would that take place? Because I can imagine you can do a lot in the Create.js part, like handling of uploads, but you may want to do some server-side processing, scaling, thumbnailing, this kind of stuff. How do you envision that?
Indeed. So with Create.js, like one of the WYSIWYG editors you can use is CK Editor, and then CK Editor has this plugin called Lfinder, which has there is Symfony bundles to use Lfinder. So with that, for example, you can upload images, and we also worked on a PHP-CR integration so that you can store the images into the repository if you want that. The other thing we added in summer is a CMF media bundle, which tries to provide some base interfaces to say what's a media, what's a file, because like sometimes the media might be external on some service and you just have metadata in your system. So there is like a couple of interfaces, and we added services around that to work with this data. But for now, it's really basically handling images and image upload. And for like everything going further, we think people should use the existing tools. So if you want like the fancy content distribution network and whatnot thing, there is a Sonata media bundle, which goes very far in that direction. And if you have images and you need to handle them, there is an integration with the Leap Imagine bundle, so that you can have an image object. So the image could be a child of your document. There is a widget for the Sonata admin where you can just upload the image into your document. And then there is the Imagine integration, so you can say, here I want to output this image. And it's doing everything for you to create the image URL and caching the image out of the content repository. Okay, so I will be around. I'll also be here on the hack day, and I'm sure I'm going to offer something on the CMF during the hack day if anybody's interested in getting their fingers dirty on it. So thanks a lot.